Okay, hello and welcome to the Dustbusters webinar. Today we're going to be learning how to prevent and mitigate combustible dust hazards. I'd like to thank you all for joining us live and to those that are viewing this at a later date. Let's go ahead and get started. So I'm Sharon Wilson. I'm the National Accounts Manager at Nelson-Jameson, and I work closely with the QCS purchasing staff and membership. We're also going to have Dave Gudoff from Delphin Industrial Corporation join us. He is the Business Development Manager and is going to be presenting the information. We also have Terry Olkers, our Technical Sales Manager for Industrial Cleaning Equipment here at Nelson-Jameson, and he'll be finishing things up at the end. Now I'd like to take just a minute to talk about Nelson-Jameson's strategic partnerships. We have partnerships with both QCS Purchasing Cooperative and Delphin Industrial Corporation. We've been a key supply partner of QCS and we've worked together for decades. Delphin is a strategic partner of Nelson-Jameson, providing a full line of solutions for dust mitigation to meet current regulatory requirements and combustible dust concerns. And we're really pleased to be able to bring this information to the QCS purchasing membership. Now I'd like to hand it off to Dave.
Thank you, Sharon. So as Sharon was saying, we're going to go through and kind of cover the perils of what combustible dust can do and how we can give the solutions to manage it. So what we want to do is we'll do the introduction of who we are as a company and stuff, the importance of controlling the hazardous dust, some of the things that have occurred and happened. Then we just don't want to talk about it. We want to provide you with some solutions, how to take care of the dust mitigation within facilities, and then a conclusion, the wrap up of the whys and what fors of why we're doing all this. So Delphin Industrial, we were established in our U.S. market here 5 years ago in 2017. But we are over a 30-year company out of Turin, Italy. And it says we are a team of 9 people, but we're more than that. We have all of our production and engineering staff behind us there in our Italian headquarters there in Turin, Italy. Our main offices and warehouse are in Plymouth, Minnesota, which we have a 20,000 square foot facility housing our equipment and parts and repair or in spare parts as such. And we also have a training and demo area at that facility. Hazardous dust. It's the first topic we want to get to. Why is there a problem with hazardous dust? So as you kind of see, I pointed out here, it's a constant thing going on from year to year. There's over 5,000 reported either food manufacturing or other areas of where explosions or fires have occurred because of hazardous dust in those situations. And here's just a number of them here off to the side that have happened really since the first of the year. And really the last 4 or 5 there have happened in just the last 6 to 8 weeks. And there's probably been some since then. And from when I first did this list, but just to point out a few of them there was some of it is just innocent types of things where you don't even know it's happening, where there's dust buildup within the heating and ductworks of a plant that catches on fire and will cause an explosion or fire. You've got the American crystal sugar there, in which they had dust collection again within their system that caused a fire. You have the RM Palmer Company there in Pennsylvania. I think a lot of people may have heard about this one here because it was on the media quite a bit about how a chocolate factory, for what the reasons there, were causing an explosion and stuff. And that one killed 7 people and that harmed a lot of other people as well. It was a total destruction. You have the Red River Commodities, their company. They had a high heat from ovens that ignited a fire. And then one of the more recent ones here is the South Fork Dairy Farm down in Texas, in which 18,000 heads of cattle were killed in an explosion and fire that occurred at that facility. So, of that 5,000, 2,500 are really in the grain and food areas that happen on an annual basis, which equals, totally is every hour you have about 15 types of these things happen when it comes to these explosions or situations with fire. So back in 2006, there was an occurrence that happened at Imperial Sugar Company down in Savannah, Georgia, and that kind of caused the whole awareness of hazardous dust. You know, they were going through a process of what they thought was a good acts of how they were going to handle things within their plant, which didn't turn out quite right because it wasn't handled properly or thought out all the way. The back a second, this explosion here caused the death of over 14 people and a total destruction, as you kind of saw in those pictures, of an entire facility there at that place. But what happened in this facility was, back in 2008, I'm sorry, was in their production areas, they had dust collection and all that, but there was a lot of dust that was occurring within the processing plant. It was much more than what the dust collection systems they had could handle. They thought one of the best ways to clean this and get everything cleaned up was using an air gun to shoot this stuff around. An air gun is great to be able to use to spray and clean a surface that's right in front of you, or where does that dust go? Everywhere else but. It's up in the rafters, it's up on the piping, it's all over the equipment. Any hard surface that it can fall onto, it will then collect, as you can kind of see in the picture there. Where the fire occurred, where this problem started was in their conveyor lines, bringing the processed sugar down the lines and moving it into where they're mixing and blending or whatever they're going to do with the packaging with the sugar. Well, they were still having a lot of problems with spillage and waste and stuff and the dust and things. So they came with an idea they thought was really good of putting a vent or a little cover over top of these things, making to where you'll capture it. It keeps the stuff from spilling onto the floors, and it'll capture any of that dust coming out in the room. So that worked well until you had a blockage on that conveyor line, which then began to spill the sugar onto the floor and other surfaces. Even with having ventilation in there, it was causing dust underneath all those covers. What happened? The dust spilled, it got onto the motors and hot bearings, which caused an explosion and ignition. And that's what caused the explosion inside of all those covered areas on the conveyor, which then led to secondary explosions throughout the whole facility because of all that dust being up in the rafters and on other surfaces and stuff. It all got in the air and started igniting and exploding. So even though you tried to do something that was positive and you thought was a good idea, it really created a bigger hazard and not thought out totally. So what led to this? Well, the Department of Labor came out with a combustible dust national program onto this. And then just in January, this program has been expanded and brought even higher focus with coming in and going to focus more on commercial baking and other areas of food processing, along with a number of areas such as lumber and printing and such as that. But a lot of it's on the food area. And even within the release of the emphasis that this program is going to be doing, they even spelled out the Imperial Sugar program that happened when the explosions occurred. So it was such an important occasion or an occurrence that happened that everything is based on that, because it was so devastating where 14 people were killed and massive amounts of injuries. So when we're looking at combustible dust, things that are spelled out, there's a lot of things that, such as sugar and flour and stuff, they're common there, but there are many other types of ingredients and dust that occur out there, whether it's metal dust or plastic dust. But here to the side here, you see there's many things on the food side of it, apple dust, carrot dust, tea, things like that you wouldn't even think would possibly be of explosive nature, but they are. When they're into a fine powdered, fine dispersed amount of dust within the air, can definitely become, be able to be ignited or cause a fire. So how does an explosion occur within a facility? Well, what we have is the dust and fire explosion pentagon. And you have 5 areas there in which you have to have each of these components for a fire and explosion to occur. And with that, you have to have a confinement of a dust. So if we look back at the Imperial Sugar as an example, see that's started all this, is, you had those hoods that went over the top of those things there that caused a confined amount of dust to be captured into there. You have to have oxygen in the air. Of course, there was oxygen in that area there, so it was able to feed and be able to provide more feeding to a fire if it occurred. Combustible dust, in that case, sugar was the combustible dust that was being, filtered up into the air. Dispersion of that dust particles, well, that happened when it started to fall around and you started to have that filtration of that up underneath and inside the hoods, and then the ignition was the hot bearings igniting that dust, or it could be a spark, or it could be any type of ignition, static electricity. Anything can cause that type of a spark or dust into there. And then with the imperial sugar, you had then, like I was saying, in the secondary sugar or the secondary explosion areas where you had that dust filtering down, you had a fire already igniting, and that just caused even more explosion. So you have to have all 5 of these components. If something is taken out of this group, then most likely a fire or dust explosion could not happen. So the guidelines and regulations that are out there, there are different organizations such as the NFPA, which is the National Fire Protection Agency, that goes out there and does a lot of the requirements and regulations for equipment and working standards. You have ATEX, which is kind of the European and international standard that's out there as well for the same thing. You have OSHA, which we're pretty much all aware of. It's Department of Labor, who's working on the safety and health of the working conditions. And then you have independent type of third-party studies or testing areas like ETL, which is Intertech, and UL, which is Underwriter Laboratories and such, and NRTL, which is a National Registered Testing Laboratories. These are all areas there that can do third-party testing of equipment or situations that are there within a facility. On the right here, you have the ETL, the Intertech that I mentioned, and the ATEX. These are the areas that they will classify as based on the dust hazard and how this vacuum or this type of a piece of equipment can sustain and be certified, whether it's class 2, div 2, or at the bottom with ATEX is zone 22. They all kind of tie together when it comes to these zoning and classifications. So with the regulations, the one that kind of stands out in this situation here is based on combustible dust, and that's the NFPA 652 regulation and guidelines. This is what was generated by that explosion there. And what really came out of this is having to have facilities do a hazard dust analysis. Many of your facilities may have already had this done. It is usually done by an outside third party coming in there and checking, seeing how explosive the air and the dust or problems that you may occur within your facility. What we've done is, what they have done then is classify these within the regulations, as I mentioned before. So you have over to the left there, you have your class 1s and your division 2 ones and type of stuff. These are gases and vapors and liquids that could cause, situations within the facility. A class 1, div 1 is basically hazardous or normal dust that's presented on a regular basis. And the division 2s it's abnormal. It's when a situation happens as it happens. At the bottom, you have it for dust, and the same situation. Is it normally present, or is it happen only during an occasion? Most of the situations that we run into, on most part, when we deal with hazardous dust, is dealing in a class 2 div 2. It's a situation that occurs, but it's on an occasional basis or not a constant basis as well. And then on 652 also, it really specifies and makes sure housekeeping is a major portion of this also. And it really spells out in this regulation that vacuuming is the best process for this versus an air gun, which we should know that's not the best. And even broom and brush causes a dust, the cloud that goes up there that could be spread as well. Now you can go, sorry. So what do? We want to provide solutions that will help your facility, be able to take the product from the very beginning states until we're cleaning up after the processing is done. So we want to provide a total dust mitigation solution. So what do? We provide that with vacuums for industrial cleaning, whether it's central vac systems or pneumatic conveyance systems, or any engineered custom solution that may be out there. We know every facility is unique of their own, and we don't want to think that anything is just a cookie cutter situation. So we could work with anyone to be able to build that proper solution for their facility. These are just some of the certifications that our products, and we look at when we're manufacturing and making sure everything is done within compliance in the industry. Some of these are the US requirements, and others are international and European requirements are there. But we take this very seriously, and we want to make sure these certifications are met and done within safety and compliance. So how do we attack the problem? We have like I was saying, we have our pneumatic conveyors. that can take a product and move it from its bulk state and move it down the line to where we're mixing and blending. We have dust collectors to where we can take the product and then catch that airborne dust while it's being mixed or being distributed within a process. And then we have our industrial vacuums. They can sit there and clean up afterwards and making sure the facility from top to bottom on any of the hard surfaces are capturing that dust and residue that may be left behind. So not just in the dust areas, but dust can contribute to a lot of things other than just a hazardous explosion and fire type of hazard. So you've got to look at areas, especially these four in the food and beverage areas and stuff. You know, when it comes to dust, if it may not be hazardous, but it can cause slip fall accidents. That's one of the major areas that you're going to have with the facility. If you have residue on the floor that could be slicker with it needs to be looked at and checked and cleaned. You know, we have respiratory diseases with silica and other types of things. Proper tools and equipment need to be worn to make sure that doesn't happen. And then, you know, just the hazardous dust as we're going to be covering, as we've been covering, you know, those are important areas to do. When it comes to worker safety and compliance, making sure we're using the right, you know, safeguards, we're communicating those hazards, we're using the right protection for those people, and we're doing the federal standards, you know, making sure everything is at a hygienic standard, as well as the quality control and maintenance of these pieces of equipment, so these situations and actions don't happen within a facility. Pneumatic conveyors, that's the first area, as I was mentioning. What we try to do is take any of the process, whether it's an ingredient, whether it's a powder or a granular or a solid, you know, and transport that from its bulk state, whether it's in a 50-pound bag or into super sacks or a Gaylord or any other types of big bin type of taking a bulk product or ingredient and moving it to where it's going to be mixed, blended, packaged, any of those types of process. So we do that with either electric or compressed air situations in our pneumatic systems. And we're able to then channel that down, put it into a hopper, and then that hopper takes it, or that process where it's being mixed and blended is then done at whatever that have that need for it. With that conveyance, we're capturing the dust and stuff that's not being poured out into the air. If you're taking a 50-pound sack and cutting it and pouring it, dust is going into the air. If you're taking a scoop and throwing it into the hopper, dust is being thrown up into the air every time you have that flume that happens when it comes with that. This transporting it in a closed system will prevent that. The dust collectors, that's the next step. That's as we are now moving that process into there, it's going into where it's being blended or processed or packaged. A dust collector will then capture that airborne air. It's not a vacuum, it's capturing the airborne product that's in there. That's the stuff that gets the small light materials that are going to be up in the air and then settle on any of the hard surfaces. This can be done with either an arm over top of the blending station, or even hard piped or hosed right into a hood that may be over top of that station to collect the dust and remove that out of the air. An example here is a picture. We've got 4 different units over a blending unit that for mixing areas in that. And we have numerous other areas that we've done in agri-food areas and food and beverage and any other of these types, in pharma and those types of areas. But we can cover many areas of that. But they all have situations where this dust is being generated. This one here is, you know, they had a mixing area that has a lot of problems and a lot of situations going on. And it was eliminated by capturing that dust at the point of blending. Then we have our certified vacs. This is taking a vac and being able to make sure it's explosion proof. It's not going to have the threat of being able to go out there and it generate a spark or an ignition point for that dust. We do that putting in brushless motors that are able to vacuum they're able to run as a vacuum for that. It's taking it in different components of it as bonding and grounding the vacuum head to the body, so you're not going to get that spark between the two. We're taking the body of the vacuum and putting a alligator clamp with a wire, grounding it to the floor or to another metal surface, so that whole chain of spark, if it was to occur, or a static electricity, would be grounded into the floor itself. We even go to the steps of taking our canisters on these units and making them stainless steel, where they're not going to be able to have a spark generated from that. We also then take the next steps of being able to take and have anti-static hoses and anti-static tools and anti-static filters that are all in there. We go 5, 6, 7 steps to make sure no static electricity or any situation like that can be happening to that. And again, these pieces of equipment are tested by Intertech. They're able to go out there as a third-party type of entity that they're testing these pieces for us and certifying them that they do meet the standards required. Then when we're moving up to class 1, we're just taking up that protection even more so. We're making the whole body, into a stainless steel application. We're putting anti-static casters onto the unit as well. We're going to a side channel blower system to where the blower and motor is off to the side and not directly attached to the unit itself that's capturing it as well. So we're taking things another step for additional earth grounding and such as we had on the others. So we can take care of any of the applications that may happen within a facility. And then, as I was saying, what's the next step? All the accessories and tools that are necessary. The next step is then in the filters, using anti-static filters, using a Nomex that's going to be able to not prevent a charge into there as well. It's using a Nomex filter that's made for heat resistance into there. So we're keeping it under 400 degrees application into there. We're using PTFE filters that are in there. They're not allowing the product to stick to the filter itself. It's more of a Teflon type of material, allowing it to fall down and drop down below. So we have a wide variety of filters that not only take and protects the dust, such as a HEPA filtration that takes it down to 99.95 of protection, of allowing that exhausted air being put back into the environment of the worker. We're taking care of that, as well as adding anti-static filters or any other type of filter that may be needed for their class or for their situation. Again, with our tools, anti-static tools and hoses are used, are suggested for any of these processes as well. And then we also go out and we have a color-coded tool line as well. And that's going out and using the HACCP concepts of going out there and using the proper tool in the proper areas, so we're not having cross contaminations. There's no chances of different things and putting a bad product, the wrong product in the wrong area, which could cause problems that eventually within the product being mixed or within what's being picked up. And then I was stating, with the problems we had with using air guns and brooms and brushes, you're getting the product up in the air, is going and doing overhead cleaning, using the proper accessories and tools for that, using carbon fiber tools that are lightweight that can reach up there, that you're not having to get up on a lift or not having to do ladders. You can work and deal with this problem from the floor level and cleaning your overhead girders and the ductwork and pipes and anything else that might be able to, fall down and be able to cause a problem there. But trying to do this without putting the operator in hazard of having to be up off the ground and being subject to anything that could happen with that.
I'm Terry Olkers with Nelson-Jameson. I work with Dave's support with Delphin Industries to provide safe solutions for your facility to address combustible dust and help understand in your facility what combustible dust is, your responsibilities for, and also to get to know the regulations. Regulations are driven by OSHA, National Fire Protection Association, which has its standards, and the recommendations of your dust hazard analysis to address this combustible dust that may be in your facility. And to deal with and answer authorities having jurisdictions, questions, concerns regarding combustible dust. What are authorities having jurisdiction? They are OSHA. They are the safety contacts within your facility or within your corporation. They are the insurance providers for risk in coverage with your facility, and also for local fire marshals. The state, local fire codes reach in international fire codes, which have a combustible dust component to them. So they talk about that, and they may talk about that with you. And also to help select safe equipment for the collection of combustible dust in your application. You can scan the QR code, the quick response code that you see on the screen here, and we will provide a site assessment through Nelson-Jameson, through Delphin, or you can directly contact me, Terry Olkers, with Nelson-Jameson. At this time, we'll answer any questions you may have in the webinar or in the group. One of the questions that has come up is, if I have combustible dust, why has nothing happened here? Why do I need to address it? Well, in most cases, it's just waiting for, as Dave talked about, all sides of the Pentagon to be there. The fuel, which is the dust, oxygen, which feeds a fire, dispersion, that dust is being blown into the air in some way through cleaning, through compressed air, through broom, dustpan, through a mixing, blending application, and then also ignition. Ignition can be most commonly static electricity, which all dust generates when it is moved, whether that's dust tumbling through a hose, which creates friction, which creates static electricity. So there might be operators that are cleaning with general duty vacuums or shop vacs that are experiencing shocks. That is a fire alarm going off in your facility. And the confinement, as Dave talked about with the sugar facility, they confined the conveyor belt to limit the amount of dust that was pluming throughout the facility, so their housekeeping would be easier. However, that kept that dust in that small area, which was heated by the bearing that got over, that it was hot, that caused the ignition. That caused the first explosion, which vibration and back pressure releases all the dust that is accumulated in the overheads on any flat surface in your facility.
We got a few questions from Amanda here. First question is, are there certified explosion-proof units available for different budgets?
Yes, there are. There are, depending upon what your dust hazard analysis is dictated, there are explosion-proof units that are used in applications or environments where there is combustible dust in the air and you are still housekeeping. There are class 2 division 2 or combustible dust safe vacuums. Once the dust is settled and your operators come in to conduct the housekeeping, you have that option available. Or there are compressed air vacuums, which do away with any sort of sparking motor, so it limits that ignition source.
The next question is, can I have more than one person using a vacuum at a time?
Depending upon the power source, yes. We have, with a vacuum, there are 2 performance specifications that you look at. One is water lift. That's the power it takes to lift the dust up off a flat surface and put it in the river of air. That's the CFM. Now, when you put more than one operator on a vacuum, you split that CFM, divide by 2, divide by 3. So you have to overcome that. And that is done by using a 3-phase blower, which generates more performance, which generates more airflow.
And then third question, can Nelson-Jameson or Delphin do my dust hazard analysis if I don't have one?
No, we are not certified to do that. That would also be a conflict of interest for us. Those are conducted by third-party entities, of which Delphin and Nelson-Jameson can refer you to.
And then can I use a dust collector as a vacuum?
Yes, you can. What you're limited by is the water lift. Dust collectors are all about airflow. They are thousands of CFM, tens of thousands of CFM. Think of it as putting a fan in the window of your house, and it's just for air movement. either cool air coming in or hot air going out, but it doesn't lift any of the dust off your flat surface, off your end table or anything like that. That is why a dust collector is different from an industrial vacuum or a central vacuum system. It's the difference in water lift performance specifications. Unless there are any other questions, thank you for your time today. We appreciate your attendance and your interest.